Mr. Nikolai Velimirowitz spoke the day before yesterday in the cathedral in the presence of a great number of people. And today, when troublemakers are openly praising him, this doctor has no orthodox degree. In the circumstances, it is necessary for us to watch this gentleman a little more, to say something about last year's self-advertising sermon at Christmas and about his study of Njegoš and religion.
Praise and attack. There's nothing moderate where Nikolai is concerned. This is a fate that will accompany him throughout his life. Nikolai begins to write more extensive works. They first appear as articles in journals and are then published as books. Njegoš's religion.
To many of our contemporaries, both rich and poor in spirit, religion appears as some old fortification, the corners and vertices of which are in ruin, the walls of which are pierced and worn through, its gateways fallen in, its doors twisted, and its thresholds broken up. But religion, as a creative force in man, is not dead but alive. It is today just as vivifying and powerful as it was in former times, except that today it is presented and expressed in a different way than formerly.
It seems as though Nikolai devoted his whole life to proving the truth of these lines. A sensation in our scientific, philosophical and theological literature. It is not just a pity, it is a sin not to read this rare book. This young professor of the Belgrade Seminary is no less interesting than the Bishop of Cetinje himself, writes a well-known elderly critic, Jovan Skerlic, although he aligns himself with those who are concerned for Nikolai's orthodoxy. According to Skerlic, on the other hand, Nikolai's evident gift is dangerous to young people, as he deludes the masses and has a bad influence on the younger generation, replacing reality with the ideas and beliefs that ideas and God's love are the fundamental laws of this world. The history of the Serbian Orthodox Church as one of the local churches of Orthodox Christianity developed through the ages at the point of encounter between East and West, two Christian confessions and two faiths, Christianity and Islam. The Christianization of the Serbian tribes was a long and complicated process which, beginning at the time of the labors of the holy brothers Cyril and Methodius and the phenomenon of literacy among the Slavs, was gaining strength. The founder of the ruling dynasty of the Nemanjićes, Stefan Nemanja, decisively opted for Eastern Orthodoxy. Nemanja's son, Rastko, who in monasticism received the name Sava, became the first Serbian archbishop, and the Serbian church became autocephalous. Saint Sava's work on the religious and cultural development of his people left an enduring mark on the history of the Serbian church and people. In the time of Emperor Dušan Nemanjić, the Serbian church achieved the status of a patriarchate. After the Serbian lands fell under the Ottoman Empire, the church in truth became the institution that preserved the identity of the Serbian people. Naturally, during this period of slavery, the general educational and theological level of the clergy fell significantly, and so the Church of the 19th century was, for the most part, awaiting the liberation of Serbia with moral courage and with the fundamentals of the faith kept safe. However, a generation of intellectuals educated in Western universities had drifted away from the Orthodox Church and begun to look on it as a conservative dead weight in the process of modernization and of embracing Western democracy. At the time at which Nikolai began his activity in Serbia, the clergy was not held in much respect, often being even the subject of ridicule. It wasn't expected that anyone in the church hierarchy would follow in the footsteps of the first Serbian archbishop, Saint Sava, that anyone at all would be able to combine the deep roots of Orthodox spirituality with modern cultural currents, and should in truth clear away the dust from the historical paths of the Serbian people. Of course, the phenomenon of a man like Nikolai was an embarrassment to many people.
To be a man Even a great man is a small thing. Be ye gods, say the Holy Scriptures. To be a man, this is a small thing. To be gods, this is the greatest of all.
But Nikolai continued to study the sciences, philosophy, theology, and art. He continued to preach and write, and began to engage in intensive national activity. He was greeted in Sarajevo as an already well-known preacher. His words were to be remembered. By their great love, the Bosnian Serbs have annexed Serbia to Bosnia. As soon as the liturgy was over, a police officer accompanied him to the first train for Belgrade, having first congratulated him on his gift of oratory. On his return, he was taken from the train in Zemun and subjected to rigorous questioning. In 1912, his books Nietzsche and Dostoevsky and The Sermon Under the Mount were published. His contemporaries agreed that Nikolai's sermons made an impression on the souls of men in the same way that light enters into a dark room. A preacher that the 20th century needed has been revealed. The well-known Serbian writer Branislav Nušić put the sermon on The Great Name as an example of a sermon in his rhetoric.
God. This single word contains the whole of my preaching. One short word, but a vast meaning, a magical power.
The Balkan War broke out in the winter of 1912. Serbia, together with the other Orthodox countries of the Balkans, moved towards decisive liberation from the Turks. Although he wasn't conscripted, Dr. Nikolai, an assistant tutor in the seminary of St. Sava, refused his salary, giving it to the state for the duration of the war, and set off with the army to the battlefield, not only to preach and console the people in the suffering of war, but also to take part himself as a humanitarian volunteer and helper of the sick and suffering. After success in the wars in Serbia, the Holy Episcopal Assembly met in 1913, and its members agreed that Dr. Nikolai be elected bishop for the vacant diocese of Niš. To the amazement of all, Nikolai declared that he was unable to accept election, both because of his attitude to the episcopate and because of the unhealthy state of the church. In 1914, a new book of Nikolai's sermons that he had preached during the Balkan Wars, Above Sin and Death, was published. In it are the words, "There is nothing in the world that makes a man so triflingly puny as the fear of death." The book was published directly before the outbreak of the First World War. European civilization was entering into a serious crisis, but Serbia was fighting for its very existence. The hero monk Nikolai, immediately after the first day of mobilization in 1914, went from Kalinic Monastery to Belgrade and placed himself at the disposal of the headquarters of the city of Belgrade and the supreme headquarters. After that, he went off to the Ajot on the Sava to the front line of fighters in the defense of Belgrade. He gave courage to the soldiers by his presence and his words, and didn't leave the place even when enemy grenades were falling all around and kicking up the earth in various directions. The collapse of the Austro-Hungarian offensive enabled Nikolai to return to Kalinic, both to rest and to continue working on manuscripts already begun. Up early. Matins. then a walk through the woods above the monastery.